The following video contains information that may be upsetting, harmful, or traumatizing for some viewers. It is advised that you watch this video with someone you trust to answer any questions that you may have. If you are a child that needs help, please talk to a trusted adult. You can also reach out to 1-800-4A-CHILD via call or text.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. A man is born.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my channel. In the 1980s, sitcom was king, with the constant laugh tracks and in some cases the proclamation of
filmed before a live studio audience.
And as a kid, sitcoms were often a placeholder for a babysitter. My parents knew that they could just toss me the remote and put me in front of the TV and we're good to go. I would watch the whole lineup of Silver Spoons, Facts of Life, and Different Strokes. That is, of course, after the news and reruns of MASH, which was the most boring hour of TV ever. Today we'll be talking about Different Strokes. And if you don't know the story of Different Strokes, well, let me explain.
Who are you? Are we enemies? Why am I on this wall? Where's Buttercup?
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Philip Drummond had a housekeeper who had two kids, and she sadly passed away. Not wanting her kids to be placed in the system, he adopted the children. Mr. Drummond himself was a widowed Manhattan millionaire and adopts the two orphans, 12-year-old Willis and 8-year-old Arnold from Harlem. And even if you're not familiar with the show, you may be familiar with Arnold's famous catchphrase,
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
Now there was a big push about being safe in the 1980s.
That's a good kind of closeness. Everyone needs to be close to others to feel wanted. But sometimes, some people will try to get close and touch you when you don't want them to, and that is wrong. No matter who.
This was also taught in schools about stranger danger, and if you were lucky by your parents at home, they would teach you the saying, don't talk to strangers. And this would also include not getting in the cars and maybe even coming up with a password that only you and your parents would know. One thing that always seemed to bother me is that in these commercials and PSAs, they always made the bad guy sort of a cartoon villain. And back then, there was no social media. And as a kid, I would not absorb much about news or read newspapers, so I would not really be aware of any real-world examples of child abuse. This all being said, I'm going to cover an episode of Different Strokes that really put the situation in situation comedy. The episode was called The Bicycle Man. It was one that caused a stir in the news and was an example of what to watch out for. So get ready and let's talk about the two-part episode of Bicycle Man, Season 5, Episodes 16 and 17. The episode started out like any other episode with corny jokes and laughs. In the shop, we were introduced to the Bicycle Man, Mr. Norton, who is juggling and making jokes and seems like a friendly man. Spoiler alert, he's the bad guy.
Well, not only that, but there are a lot of strange people out there, and I just don't like the idea of you riding in the park all alone.
After a family bike trip where they rented the bike, the story goes that Arnold wants his own bike. And Dad, Mr. Drummond, is not too sure about it. Finally, with some persuasion, Dad agrees to buy the bike for Arnold's birthday. Now, as we watch, it's going to be really upsetting for me to see the Bicycle Man as such a despicable person. You see, this character was played by Gordon Jump. I know he's just an actor, but still, prior to this, I knew him as Mr. Carlson on WKRP in Cincinnati, who was a good guy, even if not too smart, and a good boss.
As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
So it was really crushing to see him play such a despicable person. Then Mr. Horton, Bicycle Man? Maybe we should just call him BM. If Arnold hands out flyers for him, he'll get the word out on a big sale he's having. It'll also earn Arnold a radio for his new bike. Later at school, Arnold's friend Dudley says he'll help him pass out the flyers, and does a great job at it. Going back to the bike store, we see a troubling scene as he leads a boy out saying,
Candy. As a matter of fact, why don't you just make it our little secret that you was even here? Huh? Attaboy.
Arnold hands out all the flyers and returns for another batch. It's at this time BM offers him ice cream to celebrate, and leads him to the back room for a banana split, where we see this room is full of video games and other fun stuff for kids. Arnold then mentions that his friend Dudley would also like to help hand out flyers. BM decides to let Arnold ride his bike before his birthday, and he says that Arnold can come by after school anytime he wants to ride the bike. And he asked Arnold to keep it a secret. Watching this back after all these years, I can see we are clearly in trouble with sentences such as,
You know, there's just one thing, though. Maybe we better not let your dad know about the bike. In fact, maybe it would be best if you didn't even mention, that you came back here and that I gave you all this ice cream before dinner. Why don't we just make it our little secret, huh?
Dudley stops by to see what the scoop is on the bike shop. Arnold says to keep it a secret so they can get free ice cream and other cool stuff. If there's any kids watching this now, don't keep it a secret. As BM opens his little peep hatch, he sees that the kids are here and places adult magazines out where the kids can accidentally find it. He comes out being a jokester and making the kids feel comfortable. In other words, grooming. We can see that his plan is to get the kids in the back room, and if you're keeping track of red flags in this episode, we are off the charts. He lures both boys back to the room. He points out where the comic books are and where his issue of Cutie is hiding. The kids think the place is amazing, and Arnold even comments about what a great guy he really is. And as planned, the kids find the adult magazine and they can't resist. Even during this time, there's a laugh track that just seems really out of place and should not be there. It's starting to feel very uncomfortable.
The ladies are naked!
Except for the leather boots. Holy smoke! Speaking of smoke, there's something coming out of your ears.
When BM comes back, they try to say that they weren't looking at the magazine. However, he says that's okay and they need to not be so uptight. Again, yes kids, be uptight. He then continues his conditioning, telling them that it's okay. He then has pictures of him and his friend skinny dipping and shows the pictures to the boys. He then offers the boys alcohol in the way of wine. They refuse, saying they are too young, and then he says, in France, kids drink all the time, and almost dares Dudley to take a sip. BM is now starting to see that Dudley is the vulnerable one. I swear it is like radar sometimes with predators. They seem to be able to just zero in on vulnerability. After some peer pressure, they give in and drink some wine. Peer pressure is a powerful tool. No one wants to be the one that is left out or the stick in the mud. I'm here to tell you, do not worry about that. Be the one to do the right thing and be the hero. Then he gets even more creepy and says they should play games, and he knows a neat game with a camera encourages the boys to play Tarzan, which would include taking their shirt off, and still with this laugh track. He says he'll take the pictures, they should drink more, then repeat the process. They'll have a great time. And watching this in the 1980s, this is where part 1 would end, and there was no binging. You would have to wait a week to find out the fates of Dudley and Arnold. However, we're not in the 1980s anymore. The next week, the show picks up where they left off. He says they should have more wine, and Arnold refuses. BM tells Dudley that he knows his pal Dudley won't let him down. Dudley, he is not your pal. Run. The target of BM is clearly now Dudley. After Dudley gives in, then Arnold takes another sip. Arnold again tries to stop, and they put on more pressure and says it's time to play trampoline. He says they could call him Curly and be the new Three Stooges. Okay, this episode of TV is so cringy. Why did I think this would be a good idea? I mean, we're too late now. We're gonna push our way through this, but ugh. Okay, where were we? Mr. Drummond decides to pay BM a visit. He tells the boys to keep quiet so he can get rid of this random customer. Turns out Mr. Drummond is just there to buy the bike and has no idea that his child is just in the other room. However, you can see on BM's face that he's nervous that he might get caught. Arnold then takes a look through the hatch and sees that it's his dad, and not wanting to get in trouble, they grab their stuff and head out the back door to avoid getting caught. Mr. Drummond pays for the bike and leaves. That's when BM decides it's best to lock the door so he doesn't get interrupted. He goes back and the boys are gone. Arnold heads home and sneaks by with a mouth full of gum, getting scared by his siblings. Kimberly and Willis catch on and they begin to dig in to see what's really going on. After some begging and pleading from Arnold and he says he promises not to drink wine anymore, his brother and sister say they will not tell on him. However, in all the TV shows I saw back then, the truth always comes out. About this time, Dad comes in and wants a hug from Arnold. Arnold, knowing his breath smells like wine, doesn't want a hug and insists on just a handshake. On a side note, knowing what happened to Dana Plato playing Kimberly and Todd Bridges as Willis, it's strange to hear them warn Arnold off of alcohol. I mean, man, being a child star is rough and I can't even imagine navigating that. We cut to the next day and the boys return to the bike shop. He jokes with them about leaving. Ha ha ha, good one, BM. Arnold says something doesn't feel right. BM says don't leave, I have cartoons and pie. Arnold still says no, but after he finds out Dudley will get all the pie, that convinces Arnold to stay. He then lets them know that he developed the pictures they took the day before and they take a look. He then brings over the pie and cues up the cartoon. A cartoon called Murphy the Mouse. But it turns out that this mouse has no clothes on. Arnold catches on and says that it's an X-rated cartoon. BM tries to say hey, it's okay as he cuddles up with the boys. Arnold has had enough. He leaves and Dudley wants to stay. On a side note, this scene...
Somebody's at the door, Kimberly. Will you get that?
Don't
Everybody move. I'll get it.
I can totally relate to. I don't know if anyone remembers doing that when they were a kid, whether it be the phone ring or the doorbell. Me and my sister did this all the time. Well, who else is at the door but it's Dudley's dad, Mr. Ramsey. He asks for Mr. Drummond and says that they need to have a talk because he knows that Mr. Drummond's been giving them wine. Obviously, Mr. Drummond is confused by this as he is not the one giving them the wine. Kimberly and Willis decide to come clean about what they know, and then eventually everyone starts putting the pieces together. It's about this time that Arnold arrives at home and he acts innocent like nothing is happening. After Arnold can see that everything is coming out, he finally fesses up. Mr. Drummond decides that he needs to investigate, and they make the decision to call the police and head down to the bike shop. And now it's time to go to the bike shop and Chris Hansen this. They barge in and look for Dudley. They find Dudley and he says that BM gave him a pill. Luckily that is where it stopped and the police were there. Dudley says it started out as fun, and Dudley does the best thing in the world he could at this point and tells the truth. His dad is very supportive and listens. And then I think that these messages here are for any parents that happen to be watching. The police say that sometimes the parents blame the kids, and that calling the police first was the right thing to do. That way it doesn't give BM any time to destroy any evidence. One thing that always bothered me is what happened to this kid. Is he okay? Someone needs to check on this kid. And going back when I said they usually paint him out to be cartoon villains, Kimberly says that he always seemed like such a nice guy, and a lot of times that could be the case. Back in the 80s, this was a very intense message, and Mr. Drummond lets him know that he's there to listen, and finally the show concludes with this message.
Okay.
You want to talk about it?
Well, you're looking at one disillusioned dude. If you can't trust a nice man like Mr. Horton, who can you trust?
Oh, Arnold, I think you can trust most people, but you do have to be careful. Somebody wants you to do something that's wrong, or if they want you to lie to your parents, that as a person should not be trusted, no matter how good the reason they give you seems to be.
And you have to watch out for people who come on real strong and try to win you over with gifts.
That's right. And especially if they want to touch you where you don't want to be touched.
Watching this back now, I can see how important the message was that they were relaying. When I originally watched it, it probably didn't resonate as much as it does now that I'm older. Luckily, it was not something that I had to deal with. I guess it is my hope that at some point that some kid out there that needed to hear this message heard it and was able to get help. Even now, if you happen to stumble on this video and you know someone or yourself needs help, please reach out to someone you trust. If you do not have someone you can trust, use the number at the beginning of this video and I'll also add it to the description below. And yeah, I found the balance of adding jokes and going from laughing to such a dark, serious topic a little bit unsettling. And if you look back now and you're keeping track of any red flags we have, let's see, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, I can't even keep track anymore. And honestly, I don't know if this show could be made now, at least not on network television. Maybe on Netflix or something. And this is not the only sitcom that would have serious messages. I remember an episode of Family Ties with Tom Hanks where he was an alcoholic, and they would always start the same way.
This is a very special episode.
And I'm sure we can do more of these because I know Growing Pains had one too. I think Different Strokes straight out of the gate with its premise showed that they would not be backing down from this sort of topic, so I can see why they were the ones to tackle this. Anyway, I know this video was a bit of rambling, however I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, I would definitely appreciate a subscribe and a like, and if you did not like the video, go ahead and click on that link in the description to let us know. I'll talk to you soon, and you have a wonderful day. Bye everybody.
I'm really here to see Arnold.
What you talking about, Mrs. Reagan?